Muy buenas tardes a todos y todas.
Good afternoon to all of you from Chile. My name is Marisol Carrasco.
En primera instancia los invito, si es necesario, a activar
Please remember if it's necessary, you can activate interpretation in Spanish or English in the lower bar in the three dots that are there.
todos la bienvenida al cuarto
I want to
simposio
welcome
virtual titulado
everyone to this
Conversemos sobre
fourth
el marco integrado de información geoespacial,
virtual conversation
número 6.
titled Let's Talk About the Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, focused on strategic pathways 6, standards, and norms. This event is hosted by UN-GGIM, Americas, and is part of a series of conversations organized within the framework
En el marco de las actividades del grupo
of the regional working group for the
el marco integrado de
UN-IGIF framework, led by Panama and Chile.
está abordando cada
The series is addressing each strategic pathway of this global framework with the purpose of exploring tangible application experiences. We'd also like to thank our colleagues from the Americas and other regions who are joining us today, as well as the distinguished panelists who will be sharing their knowledge and experience with us. To start this conversation, I would like to invite Sofia Nilo Crisostomo, Chair of UN-GGIM Americas, who will give us some welcoming remarks. Please go ahead, Sofia. Thank you very much, Marisol. I would like to greet this share of team work from the America, from Panama, and Marisol Carrasco from Chile, and I would like to greet everyone here today in this, I don't know if it's fourth, fifth webinar about the integrated framework of geospatial information. For this opportunity, we would like to revise the sixth view, which has to do with standards, which is transcendental for the management of geospatial information on each of our countries. We will have the opportunity to know different experiences in the development, the use or application of standards and regulations for the management of geospatial information in the Americas. And I think it's the beginning of a pathway of work within our regional committee to strengthen the use of standards and regulations that allows us to improve the quality of our geospatial information and our systems so that this information has more and more value for the management within each of our governments. With that, I would like to greet you, and I hope we have a really fruitful activity, and that hopefully we leave this discussion open for other discussions for the future that will strengthen our work. Thank you very much, everyone, and I will give the floor to the panelists joining us today. Thank you very much, Marisol. Thank you very much, Sophia, for your remarks. Next, I would like to invite Paloma Abad. She's head of the Geographic Information Infrastructure Department at the National Geographic Institute in Spain, where she has led key initiatives related to spatial data infrastructures. Today, she will speak to us about the importance of Strategic Pathway 6 standards. So, welcome, Paloma. Thank you very much, and welcome.
Well, thank you for having invited me. I'm going to fix my screen. Now you see it fully. Perfect. It's perfect. Well, nice to greet you, and thank you for inviting me and to be with you. I'm Adjunct Deputy Director of the National Geographic Information Center, publishing the geographic information generated by the National Geographic Institute, but as well, can publish from other organizations. And without further ado, let's go to the next slide. You all know this space data. Well, we see the world and it's represented by geographic objects that we store in a database. They're turned into space data and they don't have any frontiers or barriers. It's done everywhere. So this needs to be treated with the same way and with the same differences. What does this actually mean? If it's possible to have the same established models so that they should be published through display and downloaded the same way, and they should be described through metadata, and they should be the same everywhere. Well, the presentation, I want to share, was translated very fastly into English. With an example, we know of normalization, we see the plugs. So we need to buy adapters to use electricity. Or other examples of normalization, it could be driving. We know that not everywhere you drive the same way, in the left or right, or the chargers for cell phones. Well, it's crazy, but this doesn't have to happen with this information. So some points about normalization, how it eases up management, better integrity of data, reduces cost. So we are a organization and I want information from other organizations, for example, three organizations. Of these three organizations, they give it to me with the same format, structure, etc. The economic cost to adapt this data to the database will be minimum because I will use the same transformation or no transformation. I will understand the data. Why? Because it has the same structure. It will be documented in the same way. All of this makes it so that it's easy for standardization, so that other organizations may use it. And if I want to develop mobile apps, viewers or download centers, again, so that geographic information is done the same way with the same procedures, well, this will be facilitated this way. I want to talk about reusability, for example. We know that from the standpoint of the users, if we take a car, it doesn't matter where we are, we all know how to drive it. Or if we go to a hotel and we want to watch TV, we all know how to use the remote. So, example of standardization, for example, if we give a user cartography and they use the water bodies represented in blue, they will know it's water. In the same way, for example, if we're generators of information, all the screws are done the same way. The measurements of fridges are the same. We could have cadastre plots that are stored in a geometric surface. And we see that standardization makes it so that for the user, they don't need to use manuals or explanations so as to use them. So what's done in Europe? Well, in Europe 20 years back, we had the Inspire directive. You might have heard about it. And the world acknowledged it, and they acknowledged that it was around 382 geographic objects. And what is this? They could be a hospital, a river. Well, generalizing, it could be the shore, a municipality, a province, a city. All of this was classified on their geographic objects, and they gave them a series of attributes and features. Then they were classified in 34 topics. For example, hydrography has a main river, a flow, and a waterfall. And for example, the transport network, the air network, railways by air, and it's a classification of what's in the world. And that's how it started. So once we have the information classified, what's done in Europe, this information needs to be in the internet. That's the goal. Why? So it's to be exchanged. Then everyone between users and companies, so that this information is published in the internet has requirements. We know description, metadata, what they describe. Another is that they should at least let me see it. An image, a map, the street, then the download. If I want to, or the download, and I want to access the data, the most optimal thing is that the data should have the same structure. Why? Because that's the third requirement. And with the structure, we will use controlled lists. Well, controlled lists, they should be standardized as well. For example, I'll invent a controlled list. For example, protect places. One could be natural and artificial. So if it's in this list, we have mineral fields, we have castles, and a list where all countries use the minimum. And in this format, the structure, which is fundamental, when we go and download it, you will understand it. There could be a document that explains it, but each standardization using its structure. The requirements are minimum and Inspire. And some organization might say, for example, my database has a lot more value. They didn't tell you to erase your database. You should at least exchange, and so that posting on the internet should be this is the minimum. And the most important part, not reinventing the wheel. Metadata in Inspire, we use ISO 19115 and ISO 19139. Visualization ISO 19128. I will not name them all, but here, these ISOs. And then specifications from standardization organizations like the ODC. We have the webmail services, the API files, NPI maps, etc. Especially in the family of these norms. This is to make it, for example, that today we use ISO, and for example, for longitude and latitude, we use something else. The thing is that once there's something that's already defined, at least if it's right or wrong, use the best. And if you want to improve it, get in touch with ISO, participant in ISO, and then you send it. This has been the minimum from Inspire. We need to publish information with a series of parameters. Well, in 2023, there's been another turn to the screw. This geographic information, well, there's information with a special value, and they're called the high-value datasets. These are some inspired topics, most of them, but it says, okay, so we'll classify them in a way. Instead of 34 topics, they turned them into, okay, there's three topics, geospatial, one, observation of the territory, environment, and mobility. I put in blue some of the examples, what geospatial has. Buildings, and these are the same Inspire. And what does land observations, elevations, and such? This makes it so that, well, we're publishing like Inspire, but I want a little bit more. Why? So that the data could be reused and actually be reused. And these data sets are the high value data sets. So what's required is that the format, even though Inspire says GML, Geo package, and GeoJSON, well, they said, okay, use it, but you need to use a format that is open, legible by a machine, and publicly documented. In regards to licensing, Inspire said nothing. Well, it said that you needed to specify the licensing, but it could be any, like for example, copyright. They said no. Okay, here the license they need CC by 4.0. It's the only requirement. If a company downloads the information and uses them, the only requirement is that they should name you and quote you. That they say that the data are from this organization. That's the minimum requirement. But they can sell them. They can modify them. They can do anything. And the download, it says that from a download, we need to do two things, an API and batch download. If you have a ADOM, you have batch download. In Spain, we're using API files, API features, the evolution of the web feature services. And you've seen the high value classified. They need to have a legible model, a license that is open, not so restrictive, and a download from API and batch download. Why? So that the data could be reused. Joining all of this, what was defined in UN-GGIM Europe, well, there are some documents. The definition of basic data, for example, it says, well, it's very similar to Inspire. They say that the data are fundamental, and it establishes a list of basic data, which are called the core of space data, in which they need to be standardized, and this is the baseline and the most important part to do studies in order to measure, and that will be useful for sustainable development goals. They need to be reproduced by the organism. There shouldn't be any duplicates with a minimum resolution, and they say the same as Inspire. They established rules that then they were used by UN-GGIM Europe, and the or other value are based on Inspire. And they say the same thing, that data need to be in the internet, standardized, which is the basic thing. Here's some features of basic data about core data. They should not be heterogeneous, interoperable, and intensify coordination amongst organizations that data exchange is heterogeneous, and we will define at least a structure. Like for example, hydrography, we need to see to what scale we do a line, for example. And these need to be distributed. And then why? Because as you know, in IGGIM, there were a bunch of indicators set. The SDGs, and here we're working the 11.2.1, the share of population that has access to public transport. And we have all the post address, and then it was sent to the National Institute of Statistics, and we asked for sex, age, and people with disability, and with the transport network in order to calculate the bus stops and train stops. So you know mobility of the public transport system. And we have the last one. This is the last one. But all of this in regards to standards, we need to take them into a legal and technical framework. It's necessary because ISO are recommendations, they're not mandatory. And so it's necessary that each country takes these and they regulate them legally and technically, so that there should be requirements. In Spain, we have these, and here wrapping up, we have the references, and thank you very much. So here's my email.
Thank you very much, Paloma, for your valuable introduction that you have gave us for this strategic pathway number 6. Now we will begin the round of presentations led by our colleagues from El Salvador, República Dominicana, and Colombia, who will share their experiences implementing strategic pathway 6 on standards, focusing on practical application. We kindly ask the speakers to stick to the assigned time of 10 minutes. To begin, I leave you with Carla Alvarenga from El Salvador, a Geographic Information Systems specialist from the Territorial Information Management Department and at the National Geographic and Cadastral Institute, who will share her experience in the application of standards. Please go ahead, Carla. Thank you, Marisol. I will share my screen.
Sí, la vemos sin inconvenientes.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you very much. And for the presentation, in regards to the time, I will try to be as brief as possible, but thank you for being part of this. From El Salvador, we are emerging in this topic of infrastructure of spatial data, so we are starting in the application of standards. However, we do have some experiences. Right now, we are in a kind of a lab phase in which we are adapting ourselves, and it's important to highlight that the country still doesn't have national standards. However, we do have some experiences with international norms such as ISO. Briefly, I'm part of the management of the Informational Territorial Institute of Geographic of the National Cadastre, which is one of the goals is the National Center of the Register, and this is within the mortgages and commerce and the intellectual properties, and we are in charge of 4 important areas. One of updating
fotogramétrica con vehículos aéreos no tripulados y también ahora con vehículos con cámaras 360, así como también la definición de límites
as well as the
departamentales.
definition of the departmental and municipal and district limitations. We also produce national level maps on different scales and topics, and of course we are in charge of the management and update of the national cadastre. Briefly, this year we created the geomatic division that focuses on the data analysis, because we are in this process of not only thinking of traditional cartography, but also to provide supplies for the digital area. So it's been a challenge. Going on board of the standard is one of the first steps that we could have taken in the best way. So starting from this, I want to share some of the standards that we are already implementing with some specific examples. First of all is the one with the ISO 19110, which is being implemented for the cataloging of phenomenons. We're also defining these topics by groups and defining what this geographic office is about, what scale does it represent, and its symbology. We also have the ISO 19107 for spatial schema, the 19112 for the attributes of a type of location, and I think we also have the 19130 and 14, which are working for the quality reports. We're developing the methodologies because we're not only thinking of cartography on paper, but also digital. So we are paying attention to on the quality, and it's being more detailed. So the 19130 and 14 are moving towards where we should be headed. So we have the implementation of 19115 for the metadata and 2859 for the sampling procedure. which is implemented by the quality assessment, and as well in the National Central Register, we have the other ISO, which is part of the Integrated Management System, which is for quality assurance. So, as I mentioned before, we don't have experience or technical standardizations at a national level. We are still in this process to develop geography and cartography and cadastres, but we have these first experiences. This is the specific example on the geographic model of geographic object model. Starting from 7 important topics, we have classified the different geographic objects, and now we are under this process of respecting this catalog of objects. Why is this important? Because we started locating our information in. This is a process, and we are trying to get used and making it our own. And I think no country will allow me to lie, but this is a big challenge. So we are not only cataloging the topics, we're only also defining it according to our nation. So we're making the symbology proposals, not only for the paper, but also for the representation digitally, and so that this geographic object is cataloged going from the 19110. We do the structure of the attributes of the geographic object. This is an example of the limitations, district limits that belong to the group of national limitations on the administrative division, and after that, it ends up in a structured layer. And this is something that the rest of the countries could be seen as something easy, but it's a significant step. And to educate ourselves as a team that produces this kind of information, we need to have a structure. So starting from this, we are trying to working on the domain application, which is also being a challenge, and we are also overcoming this because we want to know more from you on Teja. Then with the application of ISO 19115, I want to share 2 experiences. This is one of the management of photogrammetry. They have all of these objects in GeoNetworks with a template, a general template. We are now developing a proposal with the profile of Salvadorian metadata, which is being implemented in the same bacterial layers in the Postgres. So we had this important challenge of how to do that the metadata is not separated from the data. And at the moment this is working, and at the beginning of this year, we are developing a manual for the index of metadata, and trying to educate each producer is a challenge. But these are just small steps that we're taking on the part of the Institute. Also, another experience is in regards of the application of the ISO 2859, which consists in starting with the size of the lot, which is the random sample that we took. This is one of the projects that we've been implementing from the management of territorial information, which is the mapping of the land, implementing the methodology of core land cover. So the process of quality control is always in 3 phases, but in the last phase is the one we have the sample validation. So when you have the vectorial layer with the information system, depending on the size of the lot, we use a tool that the same program gives you with the random selection. And starting from this sample, which is a topologic verification that is in the correct coordinated system, and it also creates a verification of the classification that the technician has made. So this allows us to have a bigger control. For the rest of the vectorial layers, we are under development, thinking of the different methodologies of quality control. As I mentioned before, we also have experience with two ISOs, which is ISO 1901, but the 1901, which is on quality control, this has set us upon a road for the National Center of Register. We have the process standardized. So this is an example of a process for the definition of municipal boundaries, which is the same for all of the process in the National Center of Register, which allows us to identify the opportunities for improvements. And lastly, starting from a project developed between 2022 to 2025, we have developed a platform, a geographic platform that is called El Salvador Max, which has a public and private version, and the private has had a huge impact, mainly in the maintenance and update of the national cadastre. So we have 14 offices at a national level in which we are doing the update under the same platform, and this allows for the homogenization and standardization of the processes. I think that because of the time, I need to stop, but I'm open for any questions you may have. Thank you, Carla, for sharing this experience with you, which will be very valued by all of the colleagues that are participating today. Continuing with this conversation, I invite Jerkari Soto, in charge of the spatial data infrastructure of the Dominican Republic at the National Geographic Institute, who will share his experience on standard with a focus on metadata. Go ahead, Jerkari.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, Marisol.
Thank you very much, Marisol. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Today, I will talk about what we've accomplished in regards to the standards in the Dominican Republic and its implementation.
Hoy les voy a presentar los avances de la República Dominicana en la
I will talk
implementación de
about
estándares
the
geoespaciales.
progress of the Dominican Republic in the implementation of geospatial standards. I will talk about the progress in strategic pathway of 6 on the IGIF, which are fundamental for comprehensive interoperable management and as well efficient of geospatial information. Our experience up until now has been centered in strengthening our legal and technical framework to ensure interoperability of the data quality and availability of themselves. Before going into the standards, I want to say within our experience with these, I will make a parenthesis in order to explain about the legal framework that gives this attribution. For the information in the Dominican Republic, we have the law 208-14 dated back from 2014, and this creates the National Geographic Institute, calling it as a national regulatory body of geography and cartography and geodesic information. In the Article 12, numeral 11, it states the responsibility for the Geographic Institute of handling the infrastructure of geospatial data. This legal database has been key for us because it's allowed to drive standardization, interoperability, and the interinstitutional articulation for correct governance of geospatial data in our country. Going into the standards, I want to say that in regards to standards and technical documentation, in 2021, we emitted a document, which is a model of quality for geographic information. This is for the alignment and technical specification and guidelines for the information in Dominican Republic. This is for transparency for the users and information producers. A document as a reference for all institutions, all national institutions which produce or handle geographic data. In that same way, we establish the clear technical specification and alignments that need to be followed to assess the quality of the information and validate it in aspects like logical consistency, completeness, update, and availability. The package of regulations go from cataloging of geographic information, 19110, then followed by 19117 for representation data, 19131 for data production, and 19157, which describes it, and metadata. I want to highlight that in the Dominican Republic, we're fighting with the culture of some institutions so that they document their data. We know that it's a bit tedious for units, for departments, but we make a huge effort so these are completed in a correct manner and so that they're maintained updated. With standards and technical documentation which impact the implementation of standards, we have the technical guideline for the publication of geographic information through this display or visualization services. This document delivers a methodology which is standardized for the creation and the management of geographic space services. This document is key for, well, it allows us to progress towards the open ecosystem so that land information in the Dominican Republic is available live and with common criteria. Additional to this, we have the technical guideline for metadata about the requirements of ISO 19115, the last revision. And this is oriented towards strengthening standardized information of geospatial data. We facilitate our institutions so that they can create or elaborate their complete data structurally and are compatible with international standards. The goal of this document is to deliver to all institutions or people that consume the knowledge enough to create and manage and maintain their metadata updated. Small parenthesis here, a point to mention that both guidelines were created in the framework of a project incorporation that we have with the World Bank in 2022 to strengthen the information of geospatial data. We have collaboration from Spain with Elige, with Panorama Abad, and these guidelines were created in this framework. And Paloma was a lot of help for us in this regard. And these guidelines have allowed us to progress in the implementation and so that institutions can document their data and publish it in a standardized manner. Additionally to this, in 2022, we trained a total of 63 technicians in topics that have to do with metadata, oriented metadata, and we approached the practical aspect, which has to do with cataloging of the geospatial information. We have a course about geoservices as well, and a course about the creation of geovisors.
Respecto a la coordinación y
with an
política,
API. In regards to coordination and policies, I want to mention that
por el Comité Coordinador
IDE is,
Permanente de las
is
Infraestructuras
coordinated.
Sociales de la República Dominicana. En la actualidad la componen 19 instituciones,
Right now
de
are
las
composed
cuales
of 19 institutions,
hay
which
algunas que también
there are
integran la
some that
Dirección del
integrate
Instituto Geográfico
the Directive
Nacional,
Council of the
también el
National
Comité Coordinador de
Institute
la IDE,
and the
que
National Commission
integran
of IDE
representantes
are
de instituciones
composed of
e instancias que intervienen en los
instances or
diferentes procesos de
representatives that
gestión de la
intervene in the
información geográfica.
different processes of geographic information.
También quiero destacar un acuerdo que
I want to
recientemente firmamos
highlight
con
an
la
agreement
Oficina
that we
Nacional
recently
Estadística
signed with the
de la
National
República
Statistics
Dominicana,
Office for
un
Dominican
convenio
Republic, an
para
agreement
impulsar esta política
so that
de
together
política
drive
de datos
a
geoespaciales
policy of
en la
geospatial
República
data that we're
Dominicana.
promoting
Y
from
también
Dominican
queremos que
Republic.
la ONE
And
tome el
we
tema
want that
nacional y
one
ayude
takes
desde
a
el
national
ámbito de sus
topic,
aplicaciones
and
a
from
implementar
their
lo que es el
applications, they
marco
should implement the framework,
global
a global
estadístico
framework
geoespacial, mejor conocido como
in statistics and
GSF.
geospatial data known as
Mencionarle también
GSF.
que
I want to
actualmente nosotros
mention
estamos trabajando en una
that
política
we're
nacional de datos
working in a national
geoespaciales.
policy of
Esto como parte
geospatial
del
data.
compromiso del
This
IGF
is part
por
of the
fortalecer la
IGN
gobernanza
to
del dato
strengthen
geoespacial.
governance of geospatial
Con
data.
esta intención se formula la política nacional.
We formulate the national policy for
Esta
this
política
regard.
para nosotros
This policy for
conlleva un
us
documento estratégico
composes a
normativo
strategic
que lo que busca es orientar a las
regulative
instituciones públicas
aspect
y a
to
otros actores
guide
claves en
public
la
and
gestión de la información,
institutions and other key players in
tránsito
management of
eficiente de la
information
misma.
exchange and efficient
El
use of
estado actual
itself.
de esta política
The current status
es
of
que
this
esperamos que
policy
en este
is that
mes
we hope
expire su
that in the
segunda
following
versión.
month we
Cabe
should
destacar que la
issue
misma se
the
encuentra
second
en fase de
revision.
borrador. Vamos
It's
a
still in draft
liberarla
form
para
and we
consulta
will
pública.
release it for public
En la nueva versión
consultation.
que vamos a
And the
liberar,
new release
la misma ya viene con los principios.
has the
Se tomaron en cuenta
principles.
para esta
And
actualización
we took into
el marco
account
IGIF y el
for the two
GSPS,
frameworks,
y también se tomaron en
IGIF
cuenta
and
o se
SGF, and
consultaron para esta actualización
were consulted for
las
this,
políticas de Chile
the
y de
policies
Panamá.
from Chile and
Esto
Panama
teniendo
as
en
well.
cuenta un horizonte
This
más
has taken into
amplio a
account
escala
a broader
regional.
horizon to a regional scale.
Todo este camino de
This path
estandarización
of
nos ha dejado mucha
standardization
enseñanza, ha estado lleno de
has brought a lot
desafíos
of
y de
lessons.
mucha
It's full of
enseñanza.
challenges and lessons.
Uno de los desafíos que quiero mencionar
One of
es
the challenges that I want to
lo que
mention
hemos encontrado, tal vez
with what we
a la colega
found,
del Salvador le sirve
our
porque
colleagues in
somos
Salvador
digamos
might
de
be
las
useful for them
IDES
because we're
más maduras,
from the
perdón, más
I,
jóvenes
these are
de la región.
the
Tenemos
youngest of the
desafíos
region.
políticos y de
We have a
prioridades
political
internacionales y es un
shift
desafío
and
con el que
international
tenemos que lidiar día a
priorities.
día.
This is a challenge that we have
Muchas
to fight
veces,
with
pues,
on a daily
las
basis. Many
instituciones sufren
times,
cambios de
institutions
suplimiento,
suffer
de
changes for the
subdirectores, y
ministers,
asimismo la parte
directors,
técnica
and the technical
sufre
aspect
muchos cambios, lo que dificulta o
suffers a lot of
ralentiza
changes,
los
which
proyectos
makes
y los
difficult or
trabajos
slows down
que tengamos en
projects
curso con ciertas instituciones o ministerios.
that we have in course with
También
certain
tenemos
ministries.
la alta
We
rotación de
have
personal técnico,
the high turn
lo
of
que
technical
permite
staff
de ciertas
in,
instituciones el
well,
personal
mainly
técnico
in
sea
certain
un personal técnico
institutions,
clave, lo
technical
que nos obliga a nosotros a volver a
personnel
reordenar el
abandons,
personal
which
y
sometimes are
esto
key and makes us
representa
going
una
back to
dilatación en los procesos.
retrain the
Algunos
personnel, and
trabajadores tienen
this
limitaciones
delays a lot.
porque
And we have also the gap of communication.
nos ponemos de acuerdo,
Technicians
pero
understand
no
us.
solo eso
We get
pasa,
into an agreement, but
también
that's
son
not enough.
tomadores de decisiones
The
y la
decision
mayor
makers
parte
as
del
well are
tiempo
there,
o en
and there's
realidad nunca
gaps. And
el
there's a
técnico
lot of
permite
gaps
que
here
él
in
ya se
between the
autoriza,
technical
porque
aspect and
en
the
un caso, por
authorizer.
ejemplo, es
To give an
una
example,
persona que debe dar
it's a
autorización
person that should give
para los fondos
authorization
para que el
for
proyecto siga hacia
funds so
adelante.
that the project moves its
Concluyo
course
rápido
onwards
en tiempo. Ya voy a
in
terminar.
time.
La falta de
Okay, I'll
recursos y
wrap up.
capacidades
Lack
técnicas es
of resources and
otro tema
technical capabilities.
muy fuerte que estamos
It's
atacando desde
another
IGIF.
topic
Entre los
that
próximos
we have in the
pasos que nosotros
Institute. In the
tenemos
following
es
steps that we have
agregar o
is
incorporar
adding
64 nuevos registros de
64
metadatos.
new
Esto
records of
documentado
metadata.
como
This
última versión de
documented
la
with
norma
the
gracias a la
latest version of the
tecnología.
norm because
Nueva
of the
versión del
guideline that we
catálogo,
were
eso es
from the
una parte muy
new version
técnica.
of the catalog.
También
This is
estamos
very
integrando
technical.
un
We're
geovisor, que es
also
un nuevo
creating a new
geovisor
GeoVisor,
que
more
debe
than a
incluir
GeoVisor. It's
soluciones
a
open source
packages
para
of
que aquellas
open source
instituciones que
solutions
quieran
so that those
disponer
institutions that wish
sus
to
datos
make
mediante
their
geoservicios
data available
estandarizados lo
through
pueden hacer.
standardized user
También estamos
services
trabajando
could
en
do
nuestro
it.
catálogo de
We're also
objetos.
working in
Tenemos esto también de forma muy
objects
clara y
database and
para
our
implementarlo
nomenclature,
también
which
tenemos
has
que
an application
contemplarlo
as well,
dispuestos
our
sobre el
data
estándar
and nomenclature
WFS.
about the WFS standard.
Ya para finalizar,
Now to wrap up,
decirles que
I just want to
desde
say
IGM
that
estamos
from
convencidos
IGN,
que la
we're
estandarización es la base para
We know that standards is to guarantee interoperability that's oriented to the needs of sustainable development. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to share our experiences as a country. And we are committed to continue strengthening our capacities for the benefit of the region and our country. Thank you very much.
Gracias a ti, Chef Kelly, por compartir
Thank
la
you,
interesante
Terry,
experiencia de
for
República
sharing the
Dominicana en
interesting
este
experience
momento.
of the
A
Dominican
continuación,
Republic in this
invito a nuestra
conversation.
tercera
Now I
panelista, Lilia
invite
Patricia
our third
Duarte.
panelist,
Ella es
Lilia
líder de la
Patricia
infraestructura
Duarte.
colombiana de datos
She's
espaciales.
head of
Además,
the
tiene una amplia
Colombian Spatial
trayectoria
Data
en búsqueda
Infrastructure. She also has
estratégica de
extensive experience
aprendizaje
in
del conocimiento.
digital
Es
transformation
una
projects,
conocida
information management,
influencia
and knowledge management.
de
She
los
will share
estándares en Colombia. Por
Colombia's
favor, Lilia,
experience on
adelante.
standards. Please
Bueno,
go
muy
ahead,
buenos días
Laila.
para todos.
Thank you
Es
and
una
good
oportunidad muy
morning,
importante
everyone.
para
This
Colombia
is a very
presentar los avances en
important
estandarización
opportunity
que
for
deben marcar
Colombia
las
to present
instituciones
the advantages of
educativas en toda así de Colombia. Este año
standardization. I
cumple
would like to
90 años,
mention
más de
our
25 años desarrollando
Geographic
infraestructura
Institute
de datos
Agustín Codazzi in
espaciales.
Colombia. This
Vamos a
year,
ver de una
it's
manera
90
corta
years
cómo estamos
developing
en este
infrastructures
trabajo que
of
le ponemos
spatial
a
data
hacer
in
en nuestro
Colombia. We will
Plan
see
Nacional
in
de
a brief
Información
manner
de
how
Gestión
we
Espacial. Hoy
are
estamos
forming
presentando
the
la Guía Estratégica de los
ITE
Estándares
in
y
our
los casos de éxito que hemos
national
logrado hacer.
information,
Nuestra
geospatial information,
Programa
and
de
what
Datos
we have
Espaciales tiene un
reached so
componente
far.
política que se ha
We
desarrollado a lo
have
largo de
a
este tiempo,
political
básicamente con un
component that has been
énfasis
developed during this lifetime.
de acuerdos
We
interinstitucionales para impulsar las
are
políticas de
putting
catastro
emphasis
genético
lately
y de
on
pavimentación
the
del territorio. El
interinstitutional
eje central
agreements
de
to
nuestras
drive the
actividades geoespaciales se
multi-purpose
tienen
cadastral
categorías
policy and the
fundamentales
administration of
que
the
son los
territory. We have
territorios
the definition that
geospatiales. Tenemos un bloque de estándares
that
de
our
datos, procesos,
geospatial data that have
diseño
three
de
fundamental
datos y
emphasis,
también la definición de
territorial
ciudades, como lo
objects,
tenemos hoy en
open
día,
data,
más
and a block of
desarrollado
standards
de
on data
servicios.
processes
Para la
and
transformación
government
nos estamos
of data,
enfocando
and also
en
digital services,
hemos
as we call it
desarrollado
today.
un ecosistema digital geoespacial que
For the
integra
access of
procesos de
information, we
datos
are
en varios
focusing and moving towards
elementos
a
de
digital
desarrollo
ecosystem that
geoespacial donde el
integrates
acceso a la
the
ciudadanía
interoperability of
integre
the
acuerdos en
geospatial
los que
information and
marquen
integrates
participación no
the
solo
citizenship
instituciones públicas,
with
también privada
agreements and a
sector
scheme of participation not only from
organizaciones
public
sociales,
institutions but also
ONGs,
the academic
en ese
sector,
bloque de
communities,
participación y
organizations, women,
desarrollo
young people, etc.,
geoespacial.
so that
En
it's
este
focused on
slide
the
estamos
participation with
generando
this
de cómo está
structure
conformado
of
nuestro Plan
knowledge
Estratégico
management.
Nacional de
This
Información
is a
Pública
general
y
view
este año
how
hemos
our
empezado a
strategic
actualizar
plan
nuestra
on
programación de
health
acuerdo con nuestro
geospatial
marco de
information is
gobernanza
formed. Last year, when we updated our
estableciendo
agreement with our governance framework
Departamento
in
Nacional de
coordination with
Programación,
the National
preparamos una serie
Department
de
on
9 líneas
Statistics,
estratégicas alineadas
we
con las
prepared
políticas
a
de
structure
Naciones
of
Unidas
9
y
strategic
pues
pathway
cada uno de esos
aligning
estrategias
with
tenemos
the United
establecidos 4
Nations. And
proyectos,
on
a
each of
excepción
these,
del
we have
área
an
de
average of 4
modelo espacial que
projects, with the
decidimos darle un
exception
grado de
of
urgencia
the
y articulación.
financial
Hoy no
model,
tengo
in
la
which we
oportunidad de
decided to make
explicarlo,
the
pero en un futuro nos
great
vamos a
project that
recapitular
articulates
grandes
everything. Now,
éxitos de estándares
we don't
en
have
las
the opportunity to
políticas
present it,
nacionales de
and
datos. De
now we're
acuerdo con
going
nuestro
to focus
plan
on the
estratégico,
strategic
nosotros
pathway
hemos
6
propuesto
and our
4
experience.
elementos
According
fundamentales para
to
actualizar
our
nuestra
strategic plan,
estandarización.
we have
Primero
proposed
es
4
definir
fundamental elements.
cómo nos encontramos en
First
materia de
one is to define
estandarización y
how we're
hacia dónde
doing
queremos
in
llegar,
matter of
identificando las
standardization and
brechas,
where do we want to
es decir,
reach,
identificando qué
indicating
estándares
the
tenemos a nivel
gaps,
nacional e
what
internacional. A
standards
partir
we
de
have at a
estas
national
brechas,
and
elaboramos
international
este año nuestro
level.
Plan
Starting
Nacional de
from these gaps,
Estandarización
we
y de
proposed this year
certificación
our plan
de
for
información
standardization
geoespacial.
and
También estamos
certification of
enfocando en
geospatial
mejorar el
information.
tema de la certificación
We're
y la
also
calidad,
focusing
no
on
solo de
the
los
topic of
datos, sino de los
certification and
servicios,
quality, not
ya sean
only
los
about data, but
geoportales
also
en Colombia,
geoservices and
varios institutos
geoportals
del
in
gobierno,
Colombia.
de
Many
diversos
institutes
sectores,
in our
han
governments
implementado
and from
portales
diverse
de
sectors
servicios
have
y
implemented
estamos
portals
mirando
with
cómo integrarlos de
geoservices,
una
and
manera
today we're seeking
inteligente
to
para
integrate
el
this
usuario sea
in a
cada vez
smart
más
way
fácil encontrar
so that for
información
the user
geoespacial.
it's easier to
Tenemos un
find
bloque transversal
geospatial
que
information.
nos permite
We have a
integrar los sistemas de
transversal
información que
block
ya se encuentran
that allows
implementados
us
en
to
nuestras
integrate the
instituciones
information
públicas y
systems that are
redes
already
sociales
implemented in our public
geográficas a
institutions,
través de un marco de interoperabilidad específico para
geographic
los datos
information through
geoespaciales.
Tenemos un interoperability
componente de
framework
conocimiento
specific for the
en la
geospatial data.
política de
We have a
desarrollo
component of
sostenible de
knowledge,
Naciones Unidas en
and
el
here we
marco
take
referencial
the
espacial,
experience of
hacer
the
que tengamos
United
como bloque
Nations
de
in
datos
terms
ahí
of
donde no solo estemos las
area
instituciones
special framework in which we don't only have the practice community of the government, but we have a network of participants with different roles that can access with digital tools to the best practices, the guidelines, and the elements that we are developing. So in this first stage on our gap analysis, we have followed from the beginning, from 1998 when we started with geographic metadata, we have followed the alignments of the ISO and then for the implementations of online services. And today we find in green the standards that are completely in operation on different public institutions. We developed the geographic metadata of the products and data sets. We define the technical specifications. We have the definition of the catalog of geographic objects and the quality assessment and the report. At the same time, the framework of metadata of geographic metadata and a standard that comes from the ISO that has to do with the administration of the territory, with the model of territorial administration domain. We have, this is the code in which we have a standard and a guideline for the implementation of online services, and we have other standards that we need to implement. The ones that are in white are not as developed as the ones in blue or green. So our challenge is to move forward in the implementation of these technical norms that are already defined nationally, and on our history, we have had the drive of the IGRE, and now we are looking for other possibilities for developing standardization documents. But in order to propose our plan of standardizations, we need to comply with these principles, this FAIR scheme, and so that the data can be found and are easily accessible and that comply with the criteria of interoperability and can be reutilized. So to reach this, we have defined here on the left side a cycle, a life cycle of the management of the information. We started with the planning. We identified why standards we need to take into account the technical specifications and the production. For example, being the Geographic Institute is the entity that is most important in the production of fundamental data for the Colombia territory. We have lines of production on the reference framework and the basic national cartography and the national cadastre, and also the agronomy and soil. So we have a series of requirements for standardizations. Within the Institute, we are given also orientations to the entities, and we are proposing some schemes of data management in which we identify the steps and what points we need to apply. And these are published in the portals, and we also define elements of interoperability that allows the use of this data to be exploited in a better way for the SDGs and the priorities at the national level of development. The next steps to implement these plans of standardization, we need to update the standards we have already defined, and we are developing this. We are making a selection of new standards of data, and the idea is to acquire them in Spanish. That is why we're consulting the information that Spain has through ENER. In Spain, they have a really important work on this topic of standardization that is useful for countries. So starting from these documents in Spanish, we want to develop the guides of standardization, define the courses. We already have a platform of e-learning in which we have courses of standardization of geographic information. We can transfer the information. We can support the institution so we can implement the process of certification. We have in our geoservices the way to select which data are available, and a set of things that qualify on the quality parameters. We have defined the parameters of interoperability, and this has been supported by the National Committee of Data. In Colombia, we have a moment of the Ministry of Technologies of Information that defines the alignments to create an infrastructure of data for Colombia. So we get aligned on these domains of interoperability, on policies and legal framework to define and exchange information on a national level. We have agreements on organization domain and semantic domain, or how we define the data models. This is how to apply the standards and formats of models and services. These definitions that we find are aligned with that give these alignments of interoperability at global level. And we're also defining the principles of data of the Federal Committee of Geospatial Data from the States that has a few years, it's going on from a few years ago, but it has some important elements that refer to open data, developing all of the technological structure. I like the topic of security and privacy. We have a lot to work on this and security. On time. I'm about to finish. We have a catalog of metadata that is online and can be consulted. We have a really advanced topic on Colombia with everything that the Geographic Institute has been able to lead and the entities related to the multipurpose cadastre. We have developed the standards from the ISO 19152. We have already connected them with interoperability. We see it in this map, and we wanted to take a step forward, not only to stay in interconnecting this through a visor, but advancing towards the analysis of territorial objects with different tools to take advantage of the data. This would be the Colombian experience. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lilia, for your outstanding presentation in this conversation on the standards in Colombia. We'd also like to thank the panelists and the participants that joined us in this fourth conversation representing the Regional Working Group of the Americas. Thank you very much for promoting the knowledge through these valuable experiences and the experiences of the countries of the region. We would like to invite you to stay tuned to our website and our social media for information about our next events during 2025. Thank you very much and see you next time. Have a great afternoon.
Gracias.
Gracias, muchas gracias.
Gracias. Adiós, gracias a todos.